The basement club The Shelter and the alternative concert location St. Andrew's Hall in the same building are two of the hippest underground locations in downtown Detroit in the 80s. At the weekend, a mix of industrial, Chicago house and Detroit techno is played at The Shelter. It becomes a regular hangout place for Richie and his friends. This is where he watches the work of resident DJ Scott Gordon with great interest.
He would just stand there and watch, and stand there and watch. He was a quiet kid, shy guy, wore glasses, unassuming. In fact, I'd go as far as saying a little bit nerdy. And so he would eventually, we'd start talking, and I blew him off for quite a while, as most DJs think they're pretty cool and don't really want to talk to anybody. Finally, I gave him a shot. I think I had to go to the bathroom or something, and I needed somebody to play a record for me. And this kid was standing there, and I just sort of grabbed him and pulled him in the booth and said, "Take over for a minute." And that's really where it started, because that kid's name was Richie Hawtin.
Not long after that, Richie has secured a DJ job in The Shelter. Richie does the warm-up set for Scott Gordon. He bridges the gap of time between Scott finishing his radio show on 96.3 FM and arriving at The Shelter.
He was maybe 18, maybe 17, something like that at this time. And he would have to come over to my house to get my records, because he didn't have a record collection at that point. So he would, he'd have to go all the way from the suburbs of Windsor, Ontario, to the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, when he would show up and he would pick up my records, and and he'd be very shy, quiet, and unassuming, and be very polite to my mother, and he'd pack the records in his car, and then he'd drive all the way back downtown Detroit where The Shelter is.
At that time, I thought I'd become a really good DJ. I learned later that I wasn't very good, but so I definitely was confident when I started with Scott, but really, really, really nervous. My friends would come early, and they were like, "Oh, okay, play later. Let's hope Scott comes later. We want to dance. Let's more people come." Usually Scott would come just as the club was filling, and they'd be like, "Okay, thank you very much. Now it's my turn," and take all the glory, right? And sometimes he would come a little bit later, and that extra 20 minutes was like something really special.
Well, back then, I paid him zero, no money. He did it. He didn't do it for money, and that's probably why I loved him so much back then. But today, I want to offer him like tons of money, and he won't even play for me.
After The Shelter, Richie regularly visits the Music Institute, one of the most important addresses for electronic music in Detroit. The After Hour Club is predominantly a meeting place for a small Afro-American scene celebrating the new sound in the city, techno.
I think when the Music Institute was around, it was special for anyone, even Detroit people, to come over to to listen to music that was not normally heard, that was a unique environment. So I guess for people from Windsor to come over, it was definitely a challenge just to come to Detroit in general and then go to a late night after club. You had to have a little guts, you know, you had to take some chances because you didn't know how safe it was going to be or what could happen to you. So, especially being that young, you know. So it definitely was, I think, a challenging thing to do. But the music, you know, that's what music do to you sometimes.
The nights and the Music Institute make Richie want to be a part of the scene and to produce this kind of music himself. His friend Karl Kowalski, who works in the Dr. Disc record shop in Windsor, introduces him to John Acquaviva, who harbors similar desires. John has been working as a DJ for quite a while and owns his own home studio in London, Ontario.
I invited John to come down and meet Richard and Dan Bell at a club called The Shelter in Detroit, thinking that they might get along just, you know, as friends, nothing more than that. Maybe they'd want to do some work together, but we didn't really think anything of it at the time.
I ended up at John's house, and he was living with his parents. And downstairs, you know, in the basement next to the washing machines and next to the clothes hanging up for drying was a small studio, you know, and it was a good situation. We just recorded, you know, and just played with machines. This was the first time I was really like in a studio myself, a serious studio. And the main thing I remember about that first day was that John had a TR-909 drum machine. And, you know, I sat there, he was like, here, check this out. And as soon as I turned this thing on, it was really like hearing all my favorite records, you know, at once, because it was the main machine that everyone was using back then. In the early days, I learned only studio stuff from John. It was later on, as we became closer friends and business partners, I learned so much from John. He was my senior in years and so much my senior in intelligence and knowledge. So it was really like I was like a sponge, just sucking everything from John. It was a perfect moment for us to meet. He had just come back from Buffalo. He had had a hard time there. He was really trying to figure out what to do, and he was exhausted. He was really finished. And I came in, and so I was sucking from him all the information and everything, and I gave him this energy and this enthusiasm. He was like, oh, okay, let's do this together. Let's try this.
Richie is getting ambitious. By his 20th birthday, he wants to have released a record. John and Richie produce first tracks and offer them to different labels in Detroit. But no one shows an interest.
By the time we started finishing some things that we liked, you know, honestly, no one else really liked it, you know, or they were too busy. You know, we talked to Derek, we talked to Kevin, not so much to Juan. We had a better connection to those guys, and you know, I had friends who were friends of them, so they definitely heard, I think, what we were doing, but there wasn't so much really support from them at that point. We took it as they were so busy. They had so many of their friends who were making music and stuff like that. Why are they going to help two kids from Canada?
I remember Richie was trying to get on with Derek and them. That's the first time I seen him at Transmat. Maybe if some of the guys had been home, but they were so busy DJing that people had to start up their own labels. 430 West did, UR did, and I guess Plus 8 did too.
I was a consumer in the older days, so I had lots of credit cards. So we basically started Plus 8 on my credit cards at about 23% interest.
The Visa Gold Card had $5,000 limit, and you know, $5,000 limit back then was we were like, wow, we can do everything with this. So we, use that to buy equipment, we use that to make the masters, and we use that to press the records. Without that, we wouldn't have got anywhere.
And now, Cyber Sonic.
His credit card pays off. Already the third single release on the newly founded label Plus 8 becomes an underground hit. Technarchy by Cybersonic, a co-production between John Akvaviva, Dan Bell and Richie Hawtin, is particularly successful in Europe and gets the label an international reputation. First booking requests from overseas come predominantly from England, Germany and the Netherlands.
It was nowhere glamour. It wasn't glamorous at all. It was, come in, sleep on someone's living room floor, go to the gig and maybe have some food and then, fly back or experience a city for a little bit. We would have went over and, slept, on a cardboard box or something and then ate potato chips for 3 weeks if it meant being able to go over and play our music and also just see the scene. To be in England, and see the energy of the whole rave scene, of what was happening then, after reading about it in magazines for 2 years, was incredible. And then after that, to go to Holland and through Germany, it was just so much more intense and so bigger and so well accepted that it gave us energy to continue going back to play, but gave us a lot of energy to come back here and throw parties and make more music, sign new artists, and be part of it.
Clubs sind aus allen Nähten geplatzt. Da ist eine Plus 8 Nummer gelaufen und alle sind steil gegangen. Ja, es wird da gefeiert in der, sage ich mal, Underground-Szene als Superstar und das war halt für den Richie 100%ig inspirierend. Er ist ja mit offenen Armen überall empfangen worden. Und er war eigentlich sehr schüchtern, muss ich sagen. Er wusste teilweise, glaube ich, gar nicht so recht, wo er hingucken soll oder wie es ihn geschieht.
But the internationally celebrated Cybersonic record of the three Canadians does not meet with the same enthusiasm in the techno scene of Detroit.
We put on this white label the future sound of Detroit. And that was very important because it was our first record to tell the world, hey, we are the next generation of people coming from Detroit.
It upset a lot of people that feel that, Detroit is theirs and this is their sacred ground or whatever. I think it was done actually out of respect, where these guys really admired the Detroit music. It influenced them.
A lot of people commented that we were coming in and taking a piece of Detroit or doing this and that. And they can say what they want. I just felt we had ideas, we had visions, and we wanted to share. The heart of Plus 8 was Detroit, but with some of the criticisms or people saying you're not really from Detroit, well, we were international. Plus 8 was not a sound of one city, of one sound. We also wanted to grow.
By now, Richie has set up his own small studio in his parents' basement. In his UTK, under the kitchen studio as he calls it, he now also works on solo productions, which he releases under the name of Fuse and Circuit Breaker. In 1992, Richie is completely enraptured by a DJ set by Derek May on a party in Detroit. The sound and the new tracks, which are created during the mixing, make him go into a 2-day marathon studio session soon after, in which he records a new album, Sheet 1, the debut album of his arguably most famous project, Plastic Man.
The whole scene was very, very intense. We were experimenting a lot when we were playing, and when we were partying. We were taking quite a lot of acid at this point in my life, and the idea for the name came out of this. We were organizing a party that got shut down by the police. we didn't know it was going to get shut down by police, so we had all just taken acid, and then we're like, shit, what are we going to do now? Like, we have no party, we're just sitting here, we're all going to start tripping in half an hour. So we all went to my friend's house and just kind of like hung out, and I ended up lying on a floor like this and sinking into the floor and becoming plastic. Some of my friends were dancing, and they were always dancing really in this really weird way that to us it didn't look like it was possible, and so it was always this like kind of joke. It's like, plastic man, plasticity. I was in Milton Keynes staying with Eddie Richards on one of my, one of the DJ tours I was doing. And we had this call, and a friend now, but a guy called Seth Hodder and Peppy Jantz called. They said, hey, we're from Mute. We really want to meet you guys. Could we, come out to Milton Keynes? And we're like, wow, you're going to come all the way out on a train, like 2 hours to meet with us? Cool. It was like everything we wanted, right? And to know they were from Nova Mute, from Mute Records, from, Daniel Miller, it was like, I think we were doing backflips just to meet someone from there. Yeah, things are going okay with the Plastic Man release. Trying to get another single out of them. It seems as though Plasticine is proving very popular with the German DJs.
The cooperation is sealed. The Sheet 1 album is released on Plus 8 and Nova Mute in 1993, and it has achieved its definite place in the Hall of Fame of techno history.
The success of Plastic Man was really an organic one. I mean, in retrospect, people think it was big splash. What Richie did in the 90s with his artist side was really a slow organic growth. It was always about a long-term vision. There was no big hits. It wasn't like Speedy J or Cybersonic, you have a big hit and you sell a lot. Plastic Man was an album.
I think the reaction was quite mixed because what he was doing was so minimalistic, and a lot of people really didn't understand it at all. And then there are other people who totally understood it. So I think it had quite a split reaction as far as I remember. People loved it or kind of hated it, really.
The project Plastic Man develops into a cult. The logo of the dancing goblin turns into a symbol of identification for many fans. It becomes one of the first genuine techno brands ever.